Welcome back everyone. Today I'm going to review this book called Democracy on the Road by Ruchir Sharma. This book is all about grassroots democracy in India and the political campaigns that are run by the politicians with the sole aim of winning elections. In the book, there is a group of journalists and media analysts and some other like-minded people who venture out in the states in different states whenever there are impending elections in those states, and then try to forecast the results as to how which party might return to power, which party might be tossed out of power, which party might get how many seats, and so on and so forth. The author is also part of this group, and he's been with them for 25 years, and he shares the experience of these 27 trips that he has taken with them. The author Ruchir Sharma is a global investor and a fund manager, and he has written extensively on economics and politics. Some of his best-selling books are Breakout Nations and The Fall and Rise of Nations. He works at Morgan Stanley and manages assets worth 20 billion US dollars that are under his management. The book starts and ends with a personal story. He talks about his hometown Bijnor. He visits there just before he finishes this book, and compares that Bijnor with the Bijnor that he saw as a child. I'll talk about some very interesting excerpts from the book. The author talks about Chandrababu Naidu, who is a regional leader of Andhra Pradesh. He talks about how elections in India cannot be won by telling the electorate that I'll provide you economic growth. He says that in India you win elections on basic issues like bijli, pani, sadak, and invoking communalism and so on and so forth. To prove this point, he talks about when the group of these people went to meet Chandrababu Naidu. When they met him in private, he told them that he will be bringing all of the technological advancement in the state, and he wishes to make the state convert the state into a technological hub. But when he went to the public and started talking to them, he talked about all those basic issues like roti kapda and makan and bijli, pani, sadak. Here he tells that the national media that made this image of N. Chandrababu Naidu of a laptop chief minister who would bring this technological advancement in India is maybe true, but it is not politically sustainable. And for that politician to win an election, the politician invokes what works with the electorate and not what the person's real thinking may be. Next excerpt is from a chapter in the book. The chapter is titled "Let Me Do My Colgate." This story is about Mayawati, the BSP Supremo. The author went to meet her. Not just him, but the whole group went to meet her. She was out of power, but she still had a bungalow that was allotted to her party in the heart of Delhi. And they were, she used to meet people in her bedroom only. They were rushed to her bedroom, and when they went there, she told them, "Then let me do my Colgate." So this is also something that the author wants to tell, that earlier the politicians used to be very easily approachable, and there was no distinction between private life and personal life. Politicians would meet you in their bedrooms, and also he discusses this, that the hospitality that the Indian politicians show, or the involvement of the family that is seen in Indian politics, or the kind of food that would be served to the press persons is unique to India. He says that if, for example, you meet some politician in the West, it is not going to happen that the politician is going to serve you with so much of local delicacies, or you will be sitting in a meeting room and not in the bedroom of the politician. So he talks about this unique, connect that or the unique hospitality that the politicians show towards the press persons. A lot of that has changed now, but he's talking about some earlier period. We'll talk about how a lot of politicians have now become rude with the press persons. We'll talk about that also. He tells some of that. Um, um, Another chapter is called Why Rajasthan Fooled Us. In this group of journalists and analysts and other people, they forecasted that Ashok Gehlot, who was in power in Rajasthan, would return to power, but instead of that, BJP won, and Vasundhara Raje became the chief minister. They concluded that after their forecast went wrong, they concluded that why it went wrong was that they did not focus on the rural part of the state, and they only went to the urban parts, into the cities, and saw that yes, there is some trend, there is some satisfaction among the people want to vote for the incumbent. And that's when they realized that just going to the cities is not enough, and that would not mean that their results would be 100% right. And that's after this trip, in 2003, I guess. Yes, in 2003, they always made it a point to go to rural areas as well as urban areas before making a forecast. Now, there's this very interesting quote from the book. The author tells that a voter told them that this election was like a cat on the wall. You couldn't know which way it would jump. Now let's talk about the meeting of this group with Narendra Modi when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. Mr. Prannoy Roy, who is the co-head of NDTV, pressed the Gujarat riots issue and asked the then Chief Minister of Gujarat and now Prime Minister Modi about why he refused to apologize when these riots took place under his watch. So the author says that Modi was dismissive, saying that there was no evidence of his involvement, so why apologize? He went on to argue that there had been complete harmony in the state and no further riots since 2002, and that he could take us around to meet Muslims who would tell them that how happy they were in Gujarat. Prannoy Roy shot back at this moment, and he said that he had just been to Beijing, where leaders offered to introduce him to journalists willing to testify to how free they were in China. This was an ouch moment for me while reading the book. Now, the Super Chief Minister. The author talks about corruption in politics in this chapter and its enormous importance to win elections in India. He mentions such incidents. For example, Vasundhara Raje is the CM of Rajasthan, and they went there when the elections were about to happen, and the economy is growing at 9%. And you see, I earlier talked about how Indian electorate do not care too much about the economy of the state. What they want is their basic amenities. The economy of Rajasthan is growing at 9%, but the public feels that Lalit Modi is the super chief minister, and that Vasundhara Raje is corrupt, and she is also tossed out of power because the public perception grew that she is corrupt. And then the author also talks about the fact that India does not provide public funding for elections not only forces candidates to turn their campaigns into a private business, it also puts pressure on them to keep raising funds once in office. They need to recover the investment made to win the last election and start putting money away to hold on to power in the next one. The private businessmen they tap for campaign funds can morph into permanent shadow ministers in charge of raising funds in return for favors and privilege. Lalit Modi was one example of a type we had seen before, including the Samajwadi Party's Amar Singh in Uttar Pradesh, and there are some others also. He also lays bare the reality of national news channels we know that there are so many so-called experts on the panels, and they say, and he lays bare this fact that they say things opposite to what they believe, and when they go off air, they start to shout what they really want to say to each other, but they don't tell that to the real public. I'll quote it for you. These shows always include a leading business figure who invariably scores the budget a 9 or 10 out of 10. But this guest went beyond merely insecure flattery. He gave yet another inflationary Congress budget an 11 out of 10 when the cameras were rolling, but then started bitching about Finance Minister Pranab Mukherjee and his reckless spending as soon as the cameras were off. So let's be very careful who we believe and who we trust, because in today's days these channel medias are just of no use. The author also talks about what's unique about Narendra Modi. He says that other politicians arrive at least 2-3 hours late in their political rallies, but Prime Minister Modi is always on time, and that's his reputation for always being punctual and on time. Now, there's very interesting story of women from Darbhanga in Bihar that the author shares with us in this book. Outside Darbhanga, they stopped in the village of Bishanpur Jagdish, which had made national headlines for a clash between local women and Nitish Kumar's government. Wedged between two rivers, the 10,000 villagers had for years pleaded with politicians to build bridges connecting them to surrounding towns and markets. When nothing happened, the women of Bishanpur Jagdish rose up in protest, fasting for days, immersing themselves in cold water for 36 hours, threatening suicide, and attracting national attention that finally drew action from the authorities. Work had begun on bridges spanning both rivers, but local told us they could not reward the legislator from Nitish Kumar's party with their votes. It took so long to get action, they were not ready to forgive. So, you see, this is how politics and governance runs in this country. But and then the author talks about Mamata. He says it's very funny. He says that the joke in Kolkata was that there is only one post in the TMC and Mamata holds it. Everyone else is a lamppost. He also talks about how in India leaders who are unmarried are now seeing a steady rise for the simple reason that people believe that because they don't have a family to succeed their legacy, so they will remain honest. Amongst India's most populous states, there were no unmarried chief ministers in 1988, but by 2016, there were 7, including Mamata, seemingly lifted by growing power distaste for nepotism inside political parties and the corruption that flows naturally from running parties as a family business. He also talks about how Mamata Banerjee lives a very simple life. Even as chief minister, she lived in her small ancestral home in Kolkata neighborhood of Kalighat. The author also talks about how we believe that Prime Minister Modi, was very famous in 2016, but that was not the case with him in some of the southern states of India. When they asked Tamil voters what they thought of Narendra Modi, whose name was beginning to overshadow all rivals in the north, some would shoot back, Modi who? So this is also, the author tries to highlight again and again in the book that what we believe, what the trends and the trends that we see in the north, we believe that all of that wave is happening in the whole of the country. That is not quite right, because he says that the politics in the south is quite different from the politics in the north. The author also talks about a lot of problems that was caused by alcoholism in Tamil Nadu. The state stores had a monopoly over alcohol sales and provided 25% of the revenues that the state government had. This revenue was used up by the government for delivering funds that were critical for the financing of the welfare schemes. But then this issue also arises that a lot of other issues, especially the safety of women, this issue arises because of the alcoholism problem that was rising in Tamil Nadu. And the author also shares this, that the women in their group were specially warned by the locals that they should stay away from the queues that are made near the liquor shops in the market. Then the local people there also told that one of the villagers said that college students used to at least hide from elders when sloshed, Now they stumble around right in front of them. School kids too had taken to drinking in public, he said. Now, as I told that, these authors, or the author and the people from his group travel to the rural parts of the states also. So there are bound to be some funny stories. One of these is that roads in the region of eastern UP were so bumpy that some of the group members began announcing 10,000 steps, 15,000 steps. Their Fitbit watches were counting the bumps. Now let's talk about Amit Shah, and there's this interesting story about him being grumpy with this group of journalists. They went to talk to him, and the author mentioned that this was his 25th election trip across India. He snapped, "What's the big deal? What have you done for the country? You roam around, but what have you done for the country?" Then there's another member in the group, Simran. She asked that why do Amit Shah, keep attacking the press, a bulwark of the democracy that has put it in power, triggering another veiled threat. He said that you people can write what you want. We know how to deal with it. There are some other instances also in the book where he's quite grumpy with this group of journalists, because he believes that they are liberals and they write critically of the government. The author also describes a very interesting and comic episode of them trying to enter into Kerala. They were in Karnataka and they wanted to enter into Kerala. What happened was that there was some dispute between between these two states, and what Kerala did was that if anybody wanted to enter into Kerala from Karnataka, they had to pay 35,000 per car to enter into the state, just to enter into the state. The party of these journalists were traveling in 3 cars, so they were asked 1,05,000 rupees just to enter into the state by the state authorities. So some of the members of the group said that they should give some bribe to the authorities and they will let them go. But some of the righteous members of the group said that no, we'll not let you do this. So after an hour of haggling and moralizing with each other and the border agents, the agents tired of our waterfalling and decided that media professionals qualify for temporary exemptions under the law and waved us through. The author says that the episode was a comic proof in India that the laws are what bureaucrats say they are, and that every state sees itself as a separate nation. There's another very funny incident that happened with the group of these journalists. They were traveling to Rajasthan for the state assembly elections in 2018, and they wanted to meet Miss Vasundhara Raje, and a member from their group, Sanjeev, called her up, and to their amusement, Raje told Sanjeev to assure his fellow limousine liberals. You see how these politicians see these liberal journalists, to tell these limousine liberals that we would find the roads of Rajasthan so smooth that not a drop will fall out of our champagne glasses. So all in all, this is an incredible book by a smart man about Indian politics. It talks about a lot of state elections and general elections. We get to know about local Indian politics better. India is not just limited to North India, is aptly and eloquently known through this book. I'd highly recommend this book to you. Thank you for listening to me. I'll be back next Sunday. Take care, stay safe.